Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss the legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedoms and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties education and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, the President and General Counsel of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country in the courtrooms of America. Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedoms.
160 million missing girls, according to the New York Times, all due to abortion. Hi, this is Shawn Akers, Dean of the Helm School of Government and Vice President for Middle Eastern Affairs with Liberty Counsel. Joining me today in studio is Deryl Edwards, the President of Liberty Counsel Action and a Director with the law school. We're in for Matt Staver today. Deryl, recently there was a very surprising article in the New York Times entitled 160 million and counting. And the point of this article is an unintended consequence of abortion that many of us didn't see coming. We have talked about many of the terrible aspects and implications of abortion, but this one is rather surprising because it appears that around the globe, many nations prefer men rather than women and have for years chosen to abort their baby girls rather than their baby boys. And what that's done is caused literally a shortage globally of women, which has increased the demand for the women that did survive, Deryl, in the area of sex trafficking.
Well, it's as you said, it's a terrible unintended consequence, and this goes back to like China's one-child policy that they had because of their population explosion, and we're paying a terrible price for the abortion. And we've learned this for years, that there are many missing children. We've talked about this before in the U.S., and there's a generational gap of children who are not here to help pay the Social Security for those who are getting up in age now and going into retirement. That's one consequence. But this is something we've not heard of before. 160 million missing little girls, missing women, because of abortion policies that are promoted not just by the Chinese and the Indians, but are fostered and encouraged by organizations like Planned Parenthood and Planned Parenthood International.
You know, Deryl, these numbers are so large that they're really hard, in my mind, to even put into context. 160 million. The Holocaust was about 12 million. We have reached in the United States about 40 million babies that have been aborted. We're talking about 160 million little girls. That's not the full count. This is 160 million little girls that have been aborted, according to this article by Ross Douthat. Now, in that article, he talks about a book, Deryl, that strikes me as very, very eye-opening by Mara Hvistendahl. This book, Unnatural Selection, Choosing Boys Over Girls and the Consequences of a World Full of Men, goes graphically into detail about how this sex selection, how choosing little girls for abortion over little boys internationally has led to what in all other terms would be deemed a genocide. I mean, this is an unbelievable admission coming from at least a lady who's not known in the conservative movement.
No, she's a liberal of all people, and as Ross points out, we need to be clear what they're talking about. These are not missing in terms of they were abandoned out of neglect or somehow they had died for other reasons. As he writes here, said they were selected out of existence by the combination of modern-day ultrasound technology and a second trimester abortion. This is eugenics is what it basically is, pure and simple, something I thought was stamped out in the early 20th century.
Well, actually, we've given them a tremendous thrust by advocating abortion globally. You talk about eugenics. What you've done here as a world, as a globe, is we've come to accept that it's all right to take the life of a person as long as you do so while they're in the womb. You have given the ability, and you see it right here. It's not just something that could happen. It did happen to 160 million little girls. And what you're exactly right. He points out that they're not just missing. In his own words, Deryl. He says that the tragedy of the world's 160 missing girls isn't that they're missing. The tragedy is that they are dead.
Yeah, and as you and I talked about earlier, we're surprised that the New York Times, of all newspapers, actually allowed this to run in their op-ed pieces that day, because normally they take the other side. But I'm glad it happened because it needed to be exposed.
You know, congratulations to the New York Times for giving something that gives the opposite point of view. Most of the things that are published there are pro-abortion. I'm sure that this is probably intended in that way as well, but the facts are the facts. And the facts in this case is that 160 million little girls were chosen over little boys to lose their lives around the globe, and now we have a shortage of women. Now, the further unintended consequence of that is now these nations are looking up. And you mentioned earlier China and its one-child policy. And you even pointed out, Deryl, that there was a particular sign that this article references that tells us the attitude toward those unborn babies in China. What was that about?
Yeah, it was. There were some signs. They said a couple of things he mentioned. Her book talks about describes scenes of abandoned female fetuses littering an Indian hospital because of this policy, to signs that could be found in Chinese villages at the height of their one-child policy that says, this is a quote, "You can beat it out, you can make it fall out, you can abort it, but you cannot give birth to it."
These are little baby girls that they were talking about.
That's what they're talking about.
And you've got literally a liberal author here who has written a book that has to come to grips. She had to stand over and stare at what they're calling the corpses of little baby girls in India here. The reality of abortion, ladies and gentlemen, is something that is much more real and much more visceral than any of the bumper stickers and the political language that we kick back and forth. These are little individuals. And the fact is that this article points out that these little individuals did not get a chance to grow up into mature young ladies who went on and married and had children of their own. And in that absence, one of those terrible unintended consequences are that you have a shortage of women, which raises the demand for the sex trade, and the women that did survive find themselves pushed more and more globally into the sex trade. Literally, Deryl, what we're seeing here is that the shortage of women caused by abortion increased the sex trade for the remaining women.
Yeah, just as you said, a terrible unintended consequences. One thing we need to point out is that Ross mentions that one of the most disturbing passages in the book, they talk about this unholy alliance between what he describes as self-consciously progressive Westerners who persuaded themselves that fewer girls might be exactly what the teeming societies of the Third World needed. So as you mentioned earlier, we have the Malthusian population control people aligned with the liberal feminist, you can abort anything that you'd like to do because it's your choice, it's your body. And that unholy alliance resulted in the death of 160 million little girls.
That is it's a devastating thought to think that there's actually those out there that would say that this is a good idea to have murdered 160 million little girls in order to keep the global population from rising because they're afraid of it. Now, some of the things that we've talked about recently, Deryl, are the national budget. And when we're talking about those portions of the budget that can be cut and those that can't, one that has been held on to drastically and tenaciously by the far left is Planned Parenthood. The funding, millions and millions of United States taxpayer dollars that go to the funding of Planned Parenthood. You know, when you read something like this, can't we all get together on Planned Parenthood? Can't we? I mean, if we're saying that the budget has to be cut, can't we at least get together and say that we don't want to use American tax dollars to fund the disappearance and the taking of the lives of more young women?
You're exactly right. And this should be the line that we should draw in the sand. Articles like this should really get us to stand up and say, and to go back to our congressmen, to go back to the senators and say, you know, you've got to stop this. You've got to stop funding this to the tune of, it's like $300 million or something. It's just a huge amount in the budget that's going to support an organization that helped foster this travesty we read about here today.
We can't afford to be silent on this anymore, ladies and gentlemen. The fact is, if we've discussed earlier on these programs, that the Constitution of the United States makes you We the people, the sovereign of the United States. And when someone, the sovereign, has to stand before a holy God and answer for the acts of a nation, it's going to be us. So let me encourage you to take part in governing. Do that by joining us. Do it in a variety of ways, but one of the most effective you can do is by joining us at Liberty Counsel in fighting against these things. Help yourself to a copy of Take Back America by Matt Staver by calling and making a donation of only $12. This will begin to give you tools that will help you become a more effective leader in the United States. You can get that by calling 1-800-671-1776.
You have been listening to Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. Our hope is to encourage and inspire you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedoms. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email update. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.